Greetings! In this lesson, we'll discuss setting keyframes and manipulating those keyframes in the graph editor. Okay, let's get started. If you're in your standard 4 view, let's switch over to our standard 2 view. We'll make this panel our camera. You can turn on your resolution gate here, lights and shadows here, and we'll make this our perspective, and I'll just go into wireframe. I'll also position my cursor here and pull over to the point where I can see my full resolution gate. And we're going to imagine that our task is to have the ball start outside of the frame, move into the frame, hold its position, and then move out again. Introductory students will typically imagine that this takes 3 keyframes for each position: outside, in frame, and then outside again. But we actually need 4 keyframes. We need 2 keyframes in the middle to hold that position. So let's first come in and we'll give ourselves 90 frames. If I just click 90 in this field, you'll see that we have the total there available to us in the time slider. This is telling us that we have a total of 200, and you're seeing that ratio there. You can also, I'm going to undo this. Let's say that was back to 120. I could just come here and type 90. And if our total frames is 90, it will automatically occupy the frames that are available to you. So this is now saying we've got 1 to 90 total, and we're seeing 1 to 90 in the time slider. So that's what our range slider does for us. When we're setting keyframes, there's a 1, 2, 3 process that's easy to remember, or good to remember. Number 1, move in time. So you go to the frame where you want the action to take place. So number 1, move in time. Number 2, manipulate the object. So in this case, this will be transforming the object, translating the object. So 1, move in time. 2, manipulate the object. And then 3, set the keyframe. And let's make sure we're in the animation mode. There's a number of ways that you can set keys. The most common is to hit S on the keyboard or to right-click in the channel box and say key selected. But for this demonstration, I'm going to be using the long form just so that you can see each time that I set it. So key, set key here. So move in time, and we'll come to frame 1, move in time, manipulate the object. We'll pull it out of the frame, and I'll pull it all the way so that we don't see the shadow here. So move in time, manipulate the object, and now we'll set the key. Key, set key. Now a couple of things have happened. In the channel box, we see that we have these red fields. That indicates an incoming channel, that a keyframe has been set. And in our time slider, we can see that at frame 1, there's a red line there indicating that there is a key. Now when I click off, I won't see that red line, just as I wouldn't see anything in the channel box. It's only for the selected item that we see the red there and the red line there. Move in time, manipulate the object, set the keyframe. I'll move in time, let's say to frame 30. I'll manipulate the object, let's put it right in the middle, and then we will set the key. Now the trick to having it hold its position, the one that's not intuitive, is that we need to set a second key without moving the object. So we're kind of skipping number 2 in our 1, 2, 3. We've moved in time, number 1 moved in time to frame 60. Manipulating the object, we're just going to leave it here. We're going to leave it at 0. And number 3, we'll set that key. So now if I scrub, right, there's no action taking place there. It's static. Oop, and we need to make the window active. So your animation only plays in the active panel. So we see from 1 to 30, it's moving in. From 30 to 60, it's static. And then we'll come to frame 90, and we'll move it out again, all the way out. 90, manipulated the object, and now I'll set the key. And if we press play, the object is out, moves in, holds its position, and then moves out again. Now, if yours is playing very fast, you may have play every frame selected. Remember, when we're running dynamic simulations, we need to have play every frame. But when we're doing keyframed animation, we want to see it play back in real time or as close to real time as your graphics card will get. So playback speed 24 times 1, and we have that. So give that a shot. We set 4 keyframes. At frame 1, the object is out of the view. At frame 30, it's in the middle. At frame 60, it's in the middle. And at frame 90, it's out. Let's take a look at the graph editor, Window Animation Editor's graph editor, and we'll get a basic time-space graph where the data or the value is running vertically and the time is running, did I say horizontally? The value is running vertically and the time is running horizontally. And we're looking at Translate X, and here we can see, if I select that first key, we can see at frame 1, Translate X, let's go to frame 1, Translate X equals 6.187. We can see that there, we can see that there. At frame 30, right, if we come to frame 30, Translate X equals 0. No, see, it's not, excuse me, this is just for, I had this selected. So we can move here to see the frame. If I want to see the value, I need to select the keyframe. So this is saying at frame 30, the value is 0, and I see that there. If I come here and select the key, at frame 60, Translate X value is 0. And then at frame 90, and if I were to select the key, I'm at frame 90 and the value is negative 4.82 for the X. Now these are flat tangents. If I were to select them all, and this is the keyboard shortcut for flat tangents, and your tangents are flat by default, what that means is we've got acceleration and deceleration into each position, or ease in, ease out in some animation applications. So this is starting off slowly, hitting a uniform rate of speed, and then slowing into this position. Likewise, accelerating out and then decelerating into its final stop. If we were to make this linear, this is our shortcut for linear tangents, right? And if I can click off, we'll get a very rigid, right? There is no acceleration or deceleration. It just comes in and stops and moves out. There's no easing in, there's no easing out. But we would want, note if I open the graph editor and nothing's there, it's because nothing is selected. I'll come back, select these, and we'll go back to flat tangent. And that's what we would want to see. So give that a shot. Get your red ball out of frame. Have it move into frame, hold its position, and then move out again as a practice for setting keys. Now, once you've done that, let's come into our standard 4 view. I'm going to delete my animation. So I have my sphere selected, and I'm coming to Edit, Delete by Type, Channels. You would think that it would say keyframe, but it's channels, the incoming channels into the channel box. You can see there we've got the red. We've got the red line here, we've got the red in our timeline, and if I come to delete by type channels, right, that disappears, our animation here disappeared, and when I scrub, nothing happens. So let's have the ball bounce once. I'm going to use my grid snapping to move that over, and let's have it start up in the air. So I'm going to say translate wide 10, or I could have just used my grid snapping to put that up 10 units. And let's think again. Move in time, manipulate the object, set the keyframe. So move in time, I'm coming to frame 1. And let's change our frames here. Let's give ourselves, 30. And let's start at 0 this time. We'll go 0. So 0 to 30. We've got our total range slider, 0 to 30, and we're seeing in our time slider, 0 to 30. Move in time, I'm coming to frame 0. Manipulate the object. I put translate Y 10. And now number 3, I'll set the key. Let's come to frame 15. We'll put that, we know that 1 unit is sitting on the ground plane for a standard size sphere. And we'll set the key. And move in time. Manipulate the object. Set the key. And let's see what we've got. So it doesn't feel like it's bouncing, does it? And that's because it's easing into and out of each position. This feels more like a piston, easing in and out of each position. So if we want the feel of a bounce, we want that change in direction to be abrupt as it hits the ground plane. Right? It wouldn't slow, if we were dropping something, it wouldn't slow as it approached the ground. It would hit the ground and abruptly change direction. So even something as simple as a single ball bounce requires that we manipulate the tangency, and we do that in the graph editor. Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Now note, if nothing shows up there, you probably don't have it selected, so make sure you have it selected. We can click on Translate Y, so we just see this. The F key works here. If you get kind of funny, you can always just hit the F key, and it will frame what you have selected, in this case, Translate Y. And this is correct. In the air, it's slowly changing position, right, each time. But this is our problem. This is slowing down. Now, when we're in the graph editor, you want to see these little squares here. I'm going to right-click on the key, and what we have here is weighted tangents. Weighted tangents. If you had non-weighted, that would just mean that you can't pull them out. If I grab this handle, and I have my move tool selected, and I'm going to use my shift middle mouse button, this would typically allow me to pull it out if they were weighted, but we see non-weighted. So sometimes when you open it up, you might see that, but we're going to be working with weighted tangents. We see a little square here. So right-click, weighted tangents, and with our move tool and middle mouse button, we can change this. Now, if I wanted to, on this side, make it so that it was coming down like a ball bounce, you can see that it has affected the other side. So by default, these handles, I'm going to put that back to flat. By default, these handles are connected on either side. And if I did do that, you can see that now we're pulling the value down below 1. And if I was to scrub through here, you would see that it indeed hits the ground plane where this value is 1, but it's going below that, right? It's driving it below that there. We wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want the ball to go below the ground plane. But the problem is we can't affect either side, either handle independently by default. So once again, I'm going to set that back to flat. And what we'll do is break the tangent. So I've got the keyframe selected. Make sure you have the keyframe selected, right? These are the keyframes. Select the keyframe, and we'll come up to this icon here, break tangents. Looks like a V. And with our keyframe selected in the graph editor, we'll click on break tangents. You see now that this line is dotted, and that indicates that it's independent. I'm manipulating again, move tool and my middle mouse button. Select this one, move tool and middle mouse button. And this is what a ball bounce should look like, or would look like. And now we get that abrupt change in direction. Right? It's hanging out in the air as gravity has an effect, and then it's abruptly changing direction as it hits the ground plane. Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor, and we can watch that play together. And right, if we wanted this to really hang out long, I'm holding the Shift middle mouse button. Anytime you want to constrain either horizontally or vertically, you're holding the Shift key. Remember that vertically is your value, horizontally is your time. So you typically, you usually almost never move both of those values at the same time, or both of those numbers at the same time. So holding the Shift key with your move tool and middle mouse button allows you to constrain either up and down or left and right. And mine got locked up there. So Shift key, middle mouse button, when you want to move only horizontally or move only vertically, right? I can pick here and let me see. Right, I'm constrained up and down, Shift middle mouse button, or Shift middle mouse button horizontally, because we typically want to either change time or change value, but you wouldn't generally do that at the same time. So you're almost always holding the Shift key and the middle mouse button, changing value, changing time. Okay, give that a shot. Questions in the discussion.